We have some massive breaking news, a huge fight announcement for UFC 303, Jamahal Hill versus Khalil Rountree Jr., June 29th, the Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler fight card. And when I first saw this, literally like 5 minutes ago, I thought it was fake news. And then I saw that the official UFC Instagram had posted it. And this is just shocking to see, honestly. My initial reaction, you're basically getting my live reaction because, again, I just figured out this news. Jamahal Hill might be as dumb as he sounds sometimes. And I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds harsh. But Jamahal Hill says all these like super cocky, super confident things. And I always thought, he says these things to kind of have this outward persona. But in reality, he's much, much smarter than that. I thought going into the Pereira fight, I'm going to stand and bang. I thought Jamahal Hill was going to mix in the grappling. Maybe that's just foolish on my part. But apparently a lot of light heavyweights like to do that against Pereira. But nonetheless, I think this is a horrible decision from Jamahal Hill. June 29th is right around the corner. Think about that. Right now it's April 19th. April 19th, you're talking literally it's 2 months away. It's essentially 8 weeks from right now. 8 weeks from right now, Jamahal Hill's going to return. Literally 6 days ago, he ate a nasty left hook that seemed to barely touch him. Flash KO'd him, in my opinion, and then he got flash KO'd like once or twice on the ground with ground and pound shots from Alex Pereira. And now he's going to jump right back into fight camp. That seems like a very, very questionable decision, in my opinion. Now, overall, before we even get into the Jamahal Hill's decision-making, which we already kind of touched on a bit, I love the matchup. Jamahal Hill versus Khalil Rountree Jr., I think it's a great fight. I think stylistically it's an amazing matchup as well. I think Khalil Rountree deserves a big fight. Jamahal Hill's now number 3 in the rankings. He's fallen down since his loss to Alex Pereira at UFC 300. But, to make that quick of a turnaround, it just shows me the current head state of Jamahal Hill. And I understand it. He needs to get that Pereira fight in the rearview mirror. He doesn't want to sit around and sulk on that KO loss. He doesn't want to sit around. And I know he's so tight. Seeing that picture of Pereira just hovering over him, memeing on him. And I think he's just desperate to get back in there, desperate to get a win, and just kind of put that in the past. And then if he gets a win over Khalil Rountree, I think he's probably going to have to fight at least one more time to get a title shot. But I don't know. Don't be so sure. It depends where the light heavyweight division goes, because I think the UFC, in a way, even though I think this is a bad decision on Jamahal Hill's part, I think the UFC is kind of gifting him this fight. Because Khalil Rountree, I know he's on a surge right now. He's on, I believe, a 5-fight winning streak. But he doesn't have the best wins. His best win is the dead corpse of Anthony Smith, which was back in December, where he made Anthony Smith do a spinneroonie, which was crazy. But I think stylistically, this is a good matchup for Jamahal Hill. Even though Khalil Rountree is surging, Khalil Rountree has nasty KO power. And I do question Jamahal Hill stepping back in there this quickly. I think it's horrible to make this quick of a turnaround after being KO'd. But I think Jamahal Hill desperately needs to get the taste out of his mouth of that loss to Pereira. I think that's what's going on here. So I think the UFC's like, you know what? Jamahal Hill kind of rushed his comeback, after a devastating, catastrophic Achilles injury. He rushed his comeback. He lost in the first round. He got KO'd. He wants to get back in there. Let's offer him a fight and let's give him a winnable matchup in Khalil Rountree. Overall, I love the fight. Again, I love the fight. I don't want this to come off as like, I'm trashing the fight, because I love this fight. Wouldn't change anything about it for me personally. I'm just trying to look at it from all these different perspectives. As a fan, I love it. I think this is a fun matchup. I think Khalil Rountree could shock us. I doubt that, honestly, but I do worry about Jamahal Hill's chin. I just don't think, and I'm not a doctor, but I just don't think you should be making 8-week turnarounds after getting, touched up by Alex Pereira. I just don't think you should. And I think Jamahal Hill is letting his confidence and his cockiness and his, self-belief and, the fact that he's constantly salty. And I know he doesn't want to sit on this one, Back in the day, I used to play Madden religiously. I haven't played it. I haven't even bought Madden for many years. I hate EA Sports. But, when for those who play any competitive game, when you lose, you want to, let's get a rematch. Let's run it back real quick. Jamahal Hill needs to get back in there for his mindset, for his own personal mental health is what I'm thinking. And I think he rushed his comeback. He kind of alluded to it a little bit in a tweet. I faced adversity to return on the biggest card, something along those lines. And I think the UFC knows that Jamahal Hill did them a favor. So they're trying to do him a favor by booking him on one of the biggest fight cards, the Conor McGregor Michael Chandler fight card, which hopefully that happens. I still have my reservations, but it is official now, so hopefully it happens. And Jamahal Hill gets an opponent in Khalil Rountree, who he should be able to beat. But let's be honest here, as much as I say Khalil Rountree's resume isn't that good, you have Anthony Smith, Chris Daukaus, Dustin Jacoby, Carl Robertson, Modestas Bukauskas, lost to Marcin Prachnio, but that's back in 2021. You look at that resume, I'm going to be honest, and maybe this is a super hot take. And I know I picked Jamahal Hill against Pereira. I know there's going to be someone in the comments say, well, you picked him. Well, I thought he looked good. I thought I saw, what I needed to see to pick him in a fight, and I justified it, but I knew it could go either way. But I'm looking at Jamahal Hill's resume, and to be honest, in retrospect, his resume is god-awful too. I mean, it's better. It's definitely better than Khalil Rountree's. Don't get the point of what I'm trying to say wrong here. Glover Teixeira on his way out, coming off a massive war against Yuri Prochazka. I know he took a long layoff. Thiago Santos, can barely... Did he even win in PFL? I don't even remember if he won in PFL. Did he lose? Yeah, he lost in PFL to a washed-up Yoel Romero. Before that, Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker's as chinny as they come, to be quite honest. Before that, I went over Jimmy Crute. Jimmy Crute should not even be in professional MMA. He's horrible. And then Paul Craig lost to Paul Craig. Paul Craig, okay, submitted him, arm injury, whatever you want to say. But either way, it's actually kind of shocking how bad Jamahal Hill's resume is. So I really think Khalil Rountree could shock a lot of us, and I think this is an optimal circumstance for Khalil Rountree. Khalil Rountree took 6 months off after a win against Anthony Smith. Jamahal Hill returns maybe a little bit early from an Achilles injury, gets brutally slapped by Pereira, and is now making, such a quick turnaround. I think this is the optimal scenario for Khalil Rountree, and I think it all comes down to Jamahal Hill just wanting to get the taste of that loss against Pereira out of his mouth. But for an early prediction, and we're going to talk about much more details surrounding this fight, but for an early prediction for this fight, I'm going Jamahal Hill. I do think he's the more skilled fighter. I do think he's the better striker. Khalil Rountree is hittable, has decent power, but he's not going to mix in the grappling, and neither really is Jamahal Hill. Obviously, we saw that against Pereira. If he's not going to mix in the grappling against Pereira, he's not going to mix it in against Khalil Rountree. But I have to go Jamahal Hill. But don't be shocked. Do not be shocked at all if Khalil Rountree somehow comes out with the victory. And at that point, if Jamahal Hill gets slapped by Khalil Rountree, I can confidently say most likely he will never be champion again. As crazy as that sounds, and I know people think I'm biased against Jamahal Hill. For me, the critiques of this fight and the critiques of the quick turnaround is me kind of thinking as if I was friends with Jamahal Hill or, thinking in the best interest of Jamahal Hill. I think he really should have took 3-4 months off, 5 months off after getting slept badly by Pereira. But I think in his mind, he has to go out there and get a win. He has to put this in the rearview mirror. And I think he told the UFC, get me a fight, get me a fight, get me a fight, get me a fight. And they obliged him. They obliged him with Khalil Rountree because if you remember, the UFC was scrambling around for a UFC 300 main event. They settled on Jamahal Hill versus Pereira, but that was literally the last possible option because they needed a big fight that at least had some big name value, and they couldn't get, Duplessis versus Adesanya done. They couldn't get countless other matchups done. Islam Makhachev versus Leon Edwards, couldn't get that done. Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev, couldn't get that done. So you know what? Let's get Jamahal Hill versus Pereira, LX Pereira. And even then, that was a quick turnaround, or not a quick turnaround for Jamahal Hill, but short notice for Jamahal Hill. I think he had, when did they announce that? I think it was the night of UFC 298. So UFC 298 was mid-February. So almost an identical scenario. I thought it was a mistake then. My early prediction was Pereira. Then I changed to Jamahal Hill because I'm like, what? Jamahal Hill's so cocky and he's so, brash. I was like, there's no way he's going to risk going out there injured and unprepared against Pereira when he knows, okay, I have to win here. But I think he probably did. Honestly, I think he probably did. And I think he's definitely searching social media, and he's definitely looking up his name, and he's definitely seeing people talk about him. And he's like, I got to go out there and get a win and prove people wrong. I'm going to make a comeback. I got clipped. He even said he was apparently arguing with fans on I don't know what the screenshots were, maybe Twitter. I feel like it wasn't Twitter, but he was arguing with some fans online earlier saying that he didn't get his ass whooped. I don't know what that was. I don't know what he considers that. To get dropped brutally, flash KO'd brutally, and then followed up with nasty hammer fists and nasty ground and pound. And honestly, I think I know people are going to say, well, he didn't go out. I think he got flash KO'd a couple times. I think that left hook flash KO'd him. You saw his eyes roll back. And then when he went on the ground, he was awake for a little bit, trying to defend and trying to scramble, and Pereira was following up and eventually kind of went out. So it was a KO. It wasn't just, I mean, he didn't get slapped. He didn't get stiffened badly, but he still got KO'd pretty bad. So I really think an ideal scenario for Jamahal Hill was that he sat out for 5 or 6 months. 6 months would put him in around October. So maybe, fight in November. Maybe fight around Thanksgiving. Maybe, you know what the UFC should have booked? They should have booked a rematch with his brother. We should have got Jamahal Hill versus his brother. The rematch, I would have loved to have seen that. The first fight, there's a lot of controversy surrounding it. It was domestic violence, alleged domestic violence. And, obviously that still has to play out in the courts. But Jamahal Hill sucker punched his brother allegedly and knocked his teeth out allegedly in front of his brother's wife and in front of his own children. Is there a better storyline than that right now? And, Jamahal Hill used that as a tune-up fight for the Pereira fight. So, you lose to Pereira, you need to jump back, you need to get back on the winning track. You haven't won since January of 2023. So by the time he steps in there with Khalil Rountree, he'll have been winless for over a year and a half, which is crazy to even think. It's crazy that UFC 283 was so long ago at this point. I remember seeing Jamahal Hill win the title. I think the Khalil Rountree Jr. fight would have been perfect, but 2-3 months down the line. If not, try to get the rematch with your brother. I think there would have been a good storyline there, and I think, maybe he could have got the win there, but I think he probably beats Khalil Rountree. Again, I don't think Khalil Rountree is this unbelievable fighter. I mean, I think he's good. I think he's improving. I think he's probably the best he's been in his entire career. How old is Khalil Rountree now? Let me actually look. He's 34, so it's now or never for Khalil Rountree. Light heavyweight's kind of ass too, so he can climb that ladder. I mean, you look at the division right now. Johnny Walker's number 7. Nikita Krylov's number 6. Hot take of all hot takes. I think Nikita Krylov absolutely ragdolls Pereira and submits him. You got Rakic, who just lost. Jan Blachowicz, who's basically on his way out. Honestly, he's old. I think he's injured right now, too. Does he have a fight? I don't think he does. Not off the top of my head, at least. Then you have Jamahal Hill at number 3. Magomed Ankalaev, Yuri Prochazka. So right now in the title picture, you basically have Yuri and Magomed, and nobody else really is in the title picture right now. So a year from now, 6 months from now, either one of those guys, I mean, if Khalil Rountree goes out there and knocks out Jamahal Hill, he's right in the title picture. If Jamahal Hill gets a win over Khalil Rountree, he's right back in the title picture. I still think he would have to win one more fight. But the UFC, I think they owe Jamahal Hill a favor for what he did for UFC 300. And I kind of feel bad for him. If he was rushed back, if he wasn't 100% prepared, if he wasn't, ready for that fight and he took that fight, I hope he got paid at least. I'm assuming he got a fat check for it, because really that was the backup plan for the UFC. But I feel bad for him because now it's like you take these very small steps and they don't seem like that much, but like, oh, yeah, I'll trim a month off my camp and I'll fight Pereira at 300, coming back from a catastrophic injury. Oh, I lost to Pereira and got memed on. Let me make a quick turnaround so I can get back on the winning track against Khalil Rountree. He gets clipped by Khalil Rountree and slept by Khalil Rountree. Next thing you know, we're saying not Khalil Rountree. Next thing you know, we're saying Jamahal Hill's career is over. I know that sounds a little bit hyperbolic, but you get my point. But one thing this does tell me, and oh my God, I absolutely love it. I don't want to jump the gun too much, but UFC 303 might actually be good. UFC 303 might actually be good. If you don't understand what I'm saying, typically these McGregor cards look kind of like shit. And right now we got Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler. We don't really have any other great fights on the card. They're not horrible fights. The second best fight, not talking about Hill and Rountree, you have Cub Swanson, Andre Fili, which is okay. Now you have Hill versus Rountree, which is a straight up banger. That's going to be on the pay-per-view main card. But you look back at some of these Conor McGregor cards. Let me pull them up real quick. Okay, let's look at 264. 264 wasn't that bad, but it wasn't great. Co-main, Gilbert Burns, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Then you got Tai Tuivasa, Greg Hardy, Irene Aldana, Yana Santos, Sean O'Malley, Chris Montino. Not a great card, not the worst card of ever. But then you go back, you look at like UFC 257, which was was second Poirier fight. You have Chandler, Dan Hooker. Okay, that's a good fight. Everything else, absolute dog shit. You know, you have some decent prelims, but at the time they really weren't even that good. But this card, 257 was horrible. And I honestly don't even know if I can look at 246. I remember 246 against Cerrone was the ugliest fight card I've ever seen. Holly Holm, Raquel Pennington co-main event. That's not even a title fight. For those of you who don't know, maybe think that's a women's title fight. Alexi Oleinik, Maurice Green featured fight on the card. So when they announced McGregor versus Chandler for 303, I was terrified that this was just going to be a straight up dog shit pay-per-view card, that it was only going to be a main event card. And right now, the fact that they announced Jamahal Hill versus Khalil Rountree, I have higher hopes for this card, that the UFC puts some quality fights on it. And, I also think, one thing I will say for Jamahal Hill taking this on a quick turnaround, Jamahal Hill's trying to elevate that name. If he can capitalize on a big win here, let's say he meme KOs Khalil Rountree, maybe makes Khalil Rountree do a spinneroonie or something like that, he's going to elevate his name for sure. Just like I believe Pereira's name value, which is he already has good name value, shot up quite a bit, getting that nasty left hook KO against Jamahal Hill on one of the biggest fight cards of all time of UFC 300. So in that respect, I think it's a decent decision, because there's going to be a lot of people chomping at the bit to fight on Conor McGregor's card, because it helps elevate that name value. That's why Sean O'Malley was on UFC 264, against Chris Montino, because the UFC wanted to elevate Sean O'Malley. I'm calling it right now. I think they're going to put Bo Nickel on 303 as well. I think they're going to put Bo Nickel on 303 because, Bo Nickel's a teacher's pet. He's constantly talking. He's like, oh yeah, hold me back. I'll beat top contenders, but he never actually fights top contenders. But anyway, to sum this all up, UFC 303 has hope. Hopefully they don't just mail it in because it's a McGregor card. It's going to do buys anyway. The fact that they added Hill versus Rountree on there is a very good decision. Massive fight for Khalil Rountree. A win could get him in title contention. Risky fight for Jamahal Hill, because this is a winnable matchup. But at the same time, coming back 2 months after a KO against a power puncher in Khalil Rountree isn't the greatest idea. Even if it's a stylistically advantageous fight, I think it's a matchup that he should win. And lastly, you got to respect Jamahal Hill for being willing to do this. I think part of it's a little bit overconfidence. Part of it's stupidity. Part of it's the fact that he thinks, any room that he walks in, the only reason his opponent is safe is because he allows them to be safe. But this isn't a media member you're threatening, Jamahal Hill. This isn't a media member that you're threatening to beat up. This isn't your brother that you're sucker punching in front of his wife and your kids. This is Khalil Rountree, number 8 light heavyweight in the world. So I don't know. It could pay off massively for Jamahal Hill, because if he wins, he's right back in title contention. Got to win on one of the biggest cards of 2024. But at the same time, I'm just questioning in my mind that it might be a poor decision. But shout out to the UFC for stacking UFC 303 with some quality fights so far. It's not a stacked card yet, but I'm just saying adding some quality fights to the card. I'm looking forward to Jamahal Hill versus Khalil Rountree. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I'm literally reacting to this live, so there's some things that maybe I didn't think of, because literally I'm still processing this news. I found out 5 minutes before I did this video. But let me know who you're picking in this fight. Let me know if you think it's a mistake for Jamahal Hill to take this quick turnaround. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.